Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Suspense is Killing Me. Today, I get to hang out with my buddy, Ed Flora. What's up, Ed? How you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going, man. Like, I feel like this is like a thing that happens all the time, although you're unaware of that because it's just me with your TikTok account, just hanging out with
That's
Ed
good.
every day.
That's not concerning at all.
Yeah, promise I'm not stalking. For those that are constant listeners of the show, I don't normally reference the social media accounts I'm on. But there's some accounts where I keep up with certain people, and you are an inspiration to me on TikTok. In fact, you're like one of the people that shoved me over the cliff without knowing that they were shoving me over the cliff to get on there. So we could
Well,
talk
thank
about.
you. I appreciate that. I
Yeah,
mean, I'll be honest with you, I feel like I'm just winging it on there.
I think
Um,
everyone is.
yeah, but yeah, it's fun. I
Well, your
enjoy it.
winging's working. so
Trying, man.
so keep
I
winging it.
I stalled getting a TikTok for the longest time. I was just very intimidated by
Mhm.
the idea. And then like I started posting it. I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is kind of good. And then my third video got like 50,000 views. I'm like, oh, am I good at this?
Dude, that's awesome.
And it's been fun. And I follow some people. I found some really awesome books based off of recommendations on there. So it's been a net benefit overall.
Well, your channel's great, and I like how consistent you are, and uh, I think that's really kind of like the thing that has been inspirational to me is like, you know, you're not putting on like a. It's like it's you. It's not like some fake person
Yeah.
persona. It's not like you talking about books one day and cats the next day. And well, not that there's anything wrong with cats. Don't come for me, cat people. I love you. I had cats growing up. I love them. But like there was like there's some accounts I've been on where it's like not necessarily consistent content when it comes
Mhm.
not necessarily the posting frequency, but like the stuff they're talking about. So it's like identify and roll. It's probably a pretty good way to do it. Anyways, I'm rambling about TikTok. Let's talk about some other things first. So Ed and I met at AuthorCon 2024.
This year, yeah.
Yeah, so it was this
I was
last
trying
March?
yeah. I was trying to put that together before we came on here. I'm like, "When did we meet?" Because it feels like
Yeah.
longer than that, but yeah, it was this past April or something like that. Yeah.
Anyone who knows me feels like it's been longer than I feel like I've known you forever, dude. Stop. Yeah, you were like we were like 2 rows apart,
Yeah.
and I was basically pinned to that table like most authors, like you're just pinned to your table the whole time you're there, and it's for anyone who hasn't been to AuthorCon, it's a run, man. It's like a crowd of people, and you're just like on the whole time. So getting away from my table was like I had to force myself up out of the chair and to move onto the floor, and hadn't made my way around to that aisle until I think like the end of the second day, and then there was Ed with his cool looking book covers, and I'm like,
Hanging out back there in the
"What?
corner.
Yeah, what's up, corner guy?"
Yes.
And this one is the Triangle Forest.
Oh, look.
There it is.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's a pretty cover. Look at that.
Thanks, man.
Although this one was not the first one I asked you about,
Mm.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and you were like, "No, no, look at the Triangle Forest."
Yes.
I've got your other one
No,
here,
no. Eyes over here. Look at this one.
Ropes in the Attic.
Yeah, you know what? And I understand why you were drawn more towards that one because that one's more of like the paranormal kind of like haunted house thing. And I know that that's kind of, your vibe right now with Burn the Girls and which
Yeah.
congratulations, Bless the Mother just came out,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Thank
That's
you.
awesome,
Yeah.
man. You're killing it right now.
Uh, I loved writing that story. We
Mm.
could I mean, there's a whole thing there's like a whole that dude, that is the most cursed launch I've ever had. And it's been insane. So, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that launch is launched.
Yes.
But man, did I love writing that book. That's what I
Mm.
keep saying over and over again because it distracts me from the craziness that I had. But look, there is literally a note in this book. This is Ropes in the Attic.
Mm.
What's up?
There it is, my old friend.
And look, podcast.
Yep, yep.
right, right in the top,
Now we're
like
here.
call Ed podcast. And now we're here, man. So it took us from March till me getting you on the horn and saying, let's do this.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the Triangle Forest. And obviously, these are not the same sort of horror. They're
No,
not the
no.
same theme. They're completely
Mhm,
different. They're similar in, well, maybe not. I was going to say they're similar in size, but the Triangle Forest looks like it's a bit bigger.
mm.
But yeah, tell me about the Triangle Forest because we got like a little cosmic horror going on here, right?
Yeah, and, it's funny because I didn't know that I was writing a cosmic horror story.
Mm,
Um, it has kind of a complicated journey that book went through. So I had an editor. Um, it took me 4 years to finish that book,
wow.
in between Robes in the Attic and the Triangle Forest. Just because I was kind of like figuring out my own voice, my own style,
Yeah.
what the book was. Um, so I worked with an editor. Um, she came back with an assessment, an editorial assessment, and saying like, you're like nailing this cosmic horror thing." And I was like, "It's not what I was going for, but I'll take it." It's funny because it started out. Um, I don't know if you've gotten into the story, but
Yeah.
the the uh, the first kind of scenes that I came up with for the Triangle Forest was like the basement stuff, and
Okay.
I had in mind like some kind of Saw, mystery. Um, in addition to that, taking stuff from like real life. There's a scene where somebody gets like stuck in the snow, like out in the mountains and like all that. So something like that happened to me like 10 years ago. I got
Really?
stuck like in the snow, like, and no service or anything like that. And it honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was driving, I had like my first car, which was like this used little Mazda, and it wasn't great to begin with. And then you put it in the snow, just not a good situation. So we're driving and, we're out in the mountains, like in the Poconos, and I have no cell service. And I'm like, oh, well, like, it's fine. Like, it's just a straight shoot to like where we're going. And we get stuck and like we're in the snow. I can't go forward. I can't go back. And there's like this slope ahead of us that looks very suspect. And I'm like, I, maybe I could kind of like wing it and go down there, but like my gut was telling me like I gotta back out, go out the way I came, and like So I knew I wanted that to be in a book. That
Gotcha.
until that point was like the most scared I ever was in my life. So that had to be in a
Fascinating.
book. So Saw plus like that little situation, and then we sprinkle in some like corporation type commentary and like all that, and it's like, okay, well, like, we have a cosmic horror book here. It's like, what's actually down in that path? You know
Mm,
what I mean?
yeah.
Is there anybody like out there in the woods? Will they help you, or do they have like bad intentions? So it kind of stemmed from that. um, we have some like X-Files type,
Right.
protagonists, like investigators, like going over the whole thing. And that's kind of where it came from. It took 4 years to kind of like piece it together. I didn't
Mm.
have a plan. I just kind of like went for it. And
So
here we
you
are.
pants the whole thing?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Which I'm kind of forcing myself away from doing that.
Mm.
Um, just because I found that having a narrative that something that I want to say going in, um, that helps me be a little bit more efficient. I don't want to spend 4 years every time I put out a new book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you're young, but you're not that young, like, it'll
Right.
take you forever, yeah,
Yes,
to get
exactly.
get your books out there.
Yeah.
Um, well, this is fascinating because when you sit down with someone's book, you it's obviously a finished product. The degree to which it's finished depends obviously on the writer, but and the publisher, but like this finding this book as a finished product, I wouldn't have assumed that was your
Mhm.
experience with it. And I have to ask, there's a early in the book when they're talking about don't go to that section of the state park and it's kind of hard to find. And if you go in there, like so that's kind of like area you got stuck in like the equivalent
Well,
or
no, actually, funny enough, so there's a few like real life things
okay.
that I've kind of pulled into that book, but that park, that's a real park. I've never actually been in there, but I was working overnights for a very long time in that kind of area, like on the Palisades, like New Jersey into New York, and like driving there dark in the middle of the night, especially like in winter when it's like pitch black at 11 o'clock. Um, I would pass by this park all the time. I'm like, what there could be like cult shit happening like in there. Like I don't know what's going on. And like I'm on my way to work, so I'm not gonna stop in there.
Right.
But it was always so creepy. You know what I mean? With
Yeah.
just like the winter night and everything. So that's where kind of like the beginning, my imagination kind of running wild, like, oh, this is my route home and everything. So yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So on the because in the book description you talk about discovering an ancient alien substance.
Yes.
Um, in the desperation to fix past turns into an obsession.
Hmm.
So dabbling in such power is dangerous, but doesn't compare to the consequences of learning. He isn't the only one with desire to control it. Jeremy means to go on this journey alone, but when Ezra Ortiz discovers the truth, he tries to stop his friend from making a terrible mistake. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's very Tommy knockers in the
yeah.
sense that there's like something out in the woods.
Mm.
And that's kind of what set out. Once I get that feedback from the editor, they're like, this is cosmic horror. I'm like, I'm going to do some Tommy knocker stuff.
So did you I was gonna ask, or this is a good place to ask, was there a certain work that kind of inspired the feel of this? I guess Tommyknockers is a really good example. I mean, like, that's kind of what I was feeling, was that, like, same kind of Tommyknockers kinda pull.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, someone will surprise me when they tell me what inspired their story because it's actually
Yeah.
something maybe different than what I anticipated. So is there anything
Hmm.
else that kind of, like, after you were done with the book, you step back
Yeah.
and, "Oh, you know what? I can feel a little bit of this other influence in this."
Well, there are two. And both of these aren't really influence as far as the overall story, but
Mm.
elements in the book I've pulled from, and they're movies. Two of my favorite movies. John Carpenter's The Thing,
Mhm.
which like there's a little bit of body horror towards the end. So it was pulled like directly from that. Um, and then 2001: A Space Odyssey,
Gotcha.
which like again it's not the whole story, but there is a little bit at the end which kind of pulls that kind of like cosmic thing that's going on towards the end of 2001. And I kind of wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, it's in there's such a like a connection between horror and sci-fi.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that they're oftentimes treated as completely like independent, mutually exclusive genres of fiction.
Hmm.
But there's just something special about like sci-fi adjacent horror, like cosmic horror.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's it's a totally different type of experience. And I wonder if yeah, I'm interested to get your perspective on this. I feel like being raised around that type of culture because I was
Hmm.
a kid of the '80s and all the movies were like it was like E.T., like you name it, it was either fantasy or
Yeah.
sci-fi. I
Hmm.
mean, it
Hmm.
was everywhere. And
Yeah.
sci-fi was huge. And I mean Star Wars. I mean that was like that was our thing.
Yeah.
So when I started getting into horror, it was actually kind of away from that a bit, but
Hmm.
Aliens, oh my
Yes.
gosh. Like, that was crazy to me. Critters, man, watching
Oh
Critters
yeah.
growing up, I was like those were my jams, man. I was like, "This is great." And I
Yeah.
never really considered it much when I was younger, but there was such a like, a deep-rooted connection between horror and sci-fi, and I feel like sometimes people try to write one or the other rather than
Hmm.
pull both into the book in a
Yeah.
certain balance to create this really kind of cool, rich experience intentionally. I think,
Hmm.
I find a lot of times people do it unintentionally. They just don't realize they're putting that much of their previous kind of sci-fi influence into their horror or vice versa. So, did
Yeah.
you did you feel compelled to address both genres in a story? Or like you said, you didn't
No.
realize you were making cosmic horror, but or maybe you did, but you just didn't label that at the point.
Yeah.
Um, but did you ever sit down, even in the early phases of the book, and say, "Oh, I definitely want to make sure there's sci-fi elements to this horror"?
I think so. I think so. Because 2001 was such an important book and movie
Mm,
in my life. So I think I wanted to include elements of that in the book. Once I figured out the overall narrative, I'm like, okay, this is what this book is going to be. We're gonna have some sci-fi stuff in there, especially the commentary on like technology and what we do with technology
right.
and all that stuff.
I was going to ask you
Um,
about the smartphones because of that.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yes,
what
yeah. The
what
smartphones are a big. I don't know where that came from, man. But I think my train of thought was just like, okay, I have this like alien thing. It's
Mm,
like a substance. It's like a whatever.
yeah.
What? How do we make this a tangible, you know, power? Like, what can we store this in?
Mm,
And I feel like cell phones are so it's with us all the time,
right.
and it's like with code and just like I have kind of a tech background too in media, and I work a lot with like building workflows,
Mm,
and like code goes into it a little bit, and just like logic based,
yep.
this goes here and decision based kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like a natural thing for me to be like, okay, we could like use tech and code to kind of contain this thing. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah, because at first it jumped out to me as, "Oh, cool, cell phones." Yeah, obviously
Mhm.
something that's, like, part of our environment, like, uh, our landscape that we don't
Yeah,
even really think too much about anymore just because it's so ingrained in our lives,
yeah,
but a little tiny flag went up in my head that said, you don't see a lot of that."
mm,
And it's part like, I mean, Stephen King's The Cell obviously
yeah,
was a pretty stark example, besides just the title of just like this super role that that type of technology plays in the story. But I was hard pressed to really think of another example of a
mm,
story that had that much of a focus on. It's not the
yeah,
center of
yeah.
your story. I'm trying not to give it away here, but
Yeah, no, no. Well, it wasn't like I put a whole lot of thought into the cell phone thing either.
Mm,
For me, it was like the easiest kind of device, because I
yeah,
wasn't about to create some new thing for the book. Like I
right.
was just thinking about like everyday objects that we have. So for me, it was the easiest thing. Um, and for the people, the fictional company in the book and the people in there using like the cell phones and the technology, like I think they had the same train of thought. They're like, "This is what we have at our disposal. We're just gonna use this,"
Yeah,
maybe
nice.
carelessly.
Okay, so let's dig in a little bit because this is where I
Mm,
start to get a little fun.
yeah,
Um, what surprised you when you were writing this? I mean, was there something that I mean, because at least for me, when I'm writing, I come into it with a certain story in mind, and they never end, not end literally like the ending of the story, but like they never in their final product form, they never resemble the thing I initially planned.
yeah,
And I'm cool with that, right? I'm
mhm,
assuming that because you mostly pants this one, that maybe this is a kind of a there's not much depth at the front of this thing when you first started, but which would lead you to be either more or less surprised by the things you discover along the way. But it's like, is
mm,
there anything now post production, post
mhm,
publication that you look back and you go, I did not see that coming? And it could be a
mhm,
character, could
yeah,
be a certain element of the story that you just would not have planned when you first
yeah,
started, even if you had been planning.
yeah. So there is, and it's one character, and I love this character just because of how much of a he he's your typical conspiracy, podcast kind of guy. And I'm talking about what was his name? Drew.
True.
So he's totally separate from the other characters. He doesn't
Mm,
interact with anyone else. He's kind of on his own. And I added him in like one of the final drafts of the book.
Oh,
And he was added to the story to kind of push this narrative that what's happening to our characters in New York is happening elsewhere. So, we have little snippets of him talking about, you know, um, somebody in Bolivia, these people like testing, on the salt flats, different technologies there, and something strange happens. Somebody in like Japan or Scotland, different things like that. So he's kind of an unreliable narrator because even though he's like delivering this information to us, he's putting this conspiracy twist on it, and you're like, is this like a believable thing? And
hmm,
um it was very fun to write that character because I've never written a character like that before. And yeah, it was a surprise because I know I wanted to I know the scale that I wanted. It was delivered in a different way in previous drafts, but then when I created him with his podcast and everything, um, it kind of like worked a little bit better. Um, yeah, yeah. I think that was
nice.
a nice surprise because I knew I needed to deliver this information. I just didn't know how I was going to do it until like the very end.
Hmm. I think the landscape, the size of the scope of the landscape in your book, um,
Mhm,
presents a unique challenge for a writer.
mhm.
It provides a unique opportunity for the writer, but it also provides a unique challenge, right? Because we tend not to think about ourselves like physically in place here in the world as having like an opportunity to be anywhere in the world, but we
Yeah.
do.
Mhm,
It's like just we could get up, and if we have the means, we could get somewhere. We have the ability to transport. With readers, sometimes I feel like we get into a story, we're not sure how big this world is going to be. We automatically assume we're going to be scene based, we're going
mhm.
to be with a certain host of characters. Did you feel a need to have a certain size landscape for a cosmic horror? Because cosmic horror like can be very centralized, but it can also
Yeah,
be very broad in its reach. So did you, because oftentimes what's happening here is happening
yeah.
elsewhere. I think with some exceptions, I mean, like Stranger Things, just to pull a very popular example, is fairly isolated to two or three locations.
Yeah.
Town A, location B in Russia or whatever. But like with yours, did you feel like you wanted to do something, or did it kind of just grow as you were writing?
So in a cosmic horror sense, I would say no,
Mm,
because before I started writing this book in 2019, um, I wasn't well versed in cosmic horror, to be honest with you. Like I knew the basics, but in terms of cosmic horror being on a smaller scale, like individuals,
mm.
I wasn't familiar with that. So when when my editor told me like, "Hey, you wrote a pretty interesting cosmic horror novel," I was like, "All right, this has to be a big grand scale type thing going on," you know. Um, and just as an aside, I did write this book planning a sequel, and I do still plan a sequel. I haven't written a word for it yet, but I have an outline.
Sure.
So at the end, you could kind of tell, like, hey, there's going to be more to this story. So there are some unresolved things in terms of like the scale of this power,
Mm.
which are going to be described a little bit more. Um, but yeah, man, from my understanding, cosmic horror had to be this big, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
It's like you look at some of these stories, it's like something from outer space comes, it's not going to come and just do a little thing. It's going to come and, it's going to take over the world. And so, you've got that kind of
yeah.
vibe going in some cosmic horror. And then in other cosmic horrors, you've got like these kind of like alien infestation kind of,
Mhm,
vibes where it's around everyone and we're just not aware yet. And then all of a sudden
mhm,
there's this uprising or whatever, you know, basically leading to the end of a bit of a post-apocalyptic kind of setup, if it gets far enough. But
mhm,
okay. So that's what queued me up. I was like, oh, this could get
mhm.
really big or this could be self-contained, and I'm not sure where
Yeah,
he's gonna go with it just yet. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Especially with the technology you were implementing, because I was thinking, well, cell phones, that's
yeah.
um, okay. So one of the other questions I had about this, because I mean, you might actually be the first cosmic horror story. Well, no, I take
Mhm,
that back. I take that back because Angela Sylvain came on.
Mhm.
We can't.
Uh,
Yeah, so we were just talking about like Frostbite right before,
yeah,
before we
yeah.
got on. Which are you did you say you were reading Frostbite right now?
I just started it like 2 days ago. I'm about 40,
Gotcha.
45 pages in. It's fun.
Nice.
It's fun so far.
Oh yeah. Like,
Yeah.
and Angela, if you ever hear this, I hope you're laughing and high-fiving yourself for me. But like when I first saw that cover, I thought, oh,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
gonna be great.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is gonna be
For
good.
sure.
Little bit of like no pressure. Don't like this story is gonna
Yeah.
have to live up to this really fun promise that you've got. But
Yeah.
she's so talented, she delivers. And she does a really good job of injecting her like personality into her work, which I think is
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, were you gonna?
Good stuff. It's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
So okay. So one of the other elements of cosmic horror that I feel I would have been conflicted about if I was trying to write cosmic horror, which by the way I've never attempted.
Mm.
So this is why I'm so curious about this, just because I have zero experience with it. Is like if you're considering the traditional approach of cosmic horror, did you feel at all responsible or obligated to hold back in other areas that you might be normally writing about? Because I remember when we first started talking, you were like, "Yeah, Ropes in the Attic and the Triangle Forest are very different,"
Yes.
which implies to me that you like to write different types of horror, different
Yep.
subgenres of horror. So, as someone who's got all that kind of bundled up in your head, did you have to draw like really clear lines, or were you like, I'm down
Mm,
for whatever"?
no, I don't think I really drew any lines. You know, I'm a big fan of the genre as a whole. I like a good ghost story. I like horror mixed with sci-fi and all that. Um, I'm even getting into like some splatterpunk stuff recently, which has been fun. But no, I kind of look at my, trajectory as a writer, and I do see myself writing in multiple subgenres of
Mm,
horror. Like I'm working on a folk horror story right now, which is again totally different from the Triangle Forest. But um I also think the Triangle Forest is a result of um how I feel about my first book because
mm.
I kind of went in really not knowing a whole lot.
Sure.
Um,
I mean, it's your first
and
book.
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like I wanted to do something so different that I'm like, I'm going full on like sci-fi, like we're getting weird, and you know what I mean? So, yeah, that's where I think my head was at there. But um, overall, I'm probably going to end up with a Stephen King variety of I'm even working on my a little splatterpunk project just
Oh,
because
cool.
like so I had this idea. I'm not going to give too much away, but it wasn't until I discovered splatterpunk that I wanted to infuse this other kind of genre that I really loved with horror, and I
Mm,
didn't know quite how to do it, and then I discovered splatterpunk. I'm like, there it is,
bingo.
that's how we're doing it. It's going to be shorter, so you'll probably hear about it next year. But it's
So,
fun.
like a
It's
novella type or?
yes, yeah,
Yeah, okay. So under 40,000 words.
yeah,
All right. That's kind of my favorite, like, space is between 40 and 60.
yeah, yeah,
I don't mind reading bigger than that, but when it comes to my own writing,
mhm,
anything over 20, I'm comfortable with.
yeah,
Anything under 20, I start to get a little nervous, because
yeah,
it's just a little harder for me to get, like, a story in.
mhm,
But that is really cool that you kind of figured out, like I love that you kind of had some patience with that too. It's like, it'll come, like
yeah,
it'll come to me when I see the opportunity and then bam, you get it. So, and so
yeah,
so that's one novel that you're going to be working on within the next year. Talk to me a little bit about that folk horror story because I'm a big fan of
mhm,
folk horror, although I'm not like
mhm,
as read on folk horror as I'd like to be. It's so adjacent to I would probably say my original love is like classic literature. So
mhm,
all the classic horror is just dripping gothic. I'm just like a gothic minded horror dude, I think at my root. And so when I hear
love it.
about folk horror, I immediately think like, okay, we're thrust back into those shadows, like into that
Yes,
type of thinking. It's a
yeah,
totally different way of writing.
Yeah.
oftentimes, you know?
Yeah.
Because more
Yeah.
contemporary like this can be a little bit more direct,
Mhm.
a little bit more like fast paced, like in the moment, kind of like less, I guess, word choice is a little bit, I don't want to say simpler because it's actually a skill to write very
Mhm.
efficiently like that. But and I don't mean like it's actually a skill, like as if it wasn't, it's just it's a
Right.
very difficult thing to write that efficiently,
Yeah, yeah.
which is one of the reasons why I think Brian Boyer, who we were talking
Mhm.
about before this, I think it's one of the reasons why his books impact me so much because when I'm reading them, it's like such direct extreme horror that
Mm.
there's no
Yeah.
hiding. It's like there's
Yes.
no gray area. There's no chance to run from it. It's brutal. It's fast. It's in your face. It's exactly what he's showing you. It's like, so,
Yeah, yeah.
anyways, do you feel, how do you feel about the folk horror with that kind of environment to write in?
It's been a new challenge, and, I like I said before, I'm kind of learning as I go with
Mm,
this thing, and I feel like this genre is also helping me folk horror, what I'm talking about, um, is helping me become a better writer.
mm,
It's, teaching me how to really write atmosphere. When I wrote my first book, Ropes in the Attic, I wanted to write
mm.
atmosphere. I don't know if I pulled it off. But with this folk horror book, I'm really focusing on like the bleakness,
Yeah.
of a town. I kind of want my writing to look like The Witch, the movie The Witch. You know what I mean? So that way, if you're getting lost in the story, which I hope people do, that they have that kind of like film over it. You know what I
Mm,
mean? That kind of like bleak looking, yeah, the darkness and all
yeah.
that. So, um, it's been a challenge, but it's been fun. And I've only been working on this one since for about a year and a half, and I'm pretty confident to say that it's like done. I think people are ready to like have eyes on it at this
Mm.
point. And that's cool because after Triangle Forest, it took me 4 years, and this one it'll be like two. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting more efficient at this. Um,
It's happening.
yeah, I'm like, okay, I could swing this. Um, but yeah, it's been fun, and I wanted to write different characters than I did previously, and I wanted like a town kind
Mm,
of feel. Like my first book was isolated to like a house, like a haunted house, and then the Triangle Forest was a little bit more all over the place.
right. We have
We
multiple
had
locations, yeah.
yeah, we had like a little town in New York, and then like driving upstate, and then
Mm,
over here, and like all over the place. So I kind of wanted a little bit more of an isolated place, but like rich with characters. So that's kind of what
right.
I set out to do with this one. Kind of like so Hex by Thomas Hoyvelt
Yeah.
really inspired me big time for this one.
That is one of my favorite book covers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
the
So good.
woman suspended. Oh, dude.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love it. Her feet like tipped down. Come on, give it.
So
Yes.
that book, I think I read that in 2021.
Mm,
And that one really opened my eyes to like modern horror. Cause before that, I was like just Stephen King, like all the time, like all
sure.
that. And then I picked up Hex and I was like, damn, this is like, I want to write this. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And then this new one isn't quite that, but it's heavily inspired from Hex.
mm.
Um, yeah, that's
Yeah, I still haven't read, uh, I want to say any of his work, although I've had my hands on three or four of his titles.
mhm,
Uh, I just haven't started them. I have them here. I'm
okay.
like,
Yeah.
I can't wait. I just know I'm gonna fall in love. Like, everything I've heard about Hex is like
Yeah.
right up my alley. So I'm a little scared. You're making me scared, Ed.
It's good. I mean, it's divisive.
Yeah.
Not everybody has,
Mm.
not everybody loves it. But that's with anything. You
Sure.
can't please everybody.
No, I'd be a little
It's
worried
a
if we could.
very it's a very distinct voice, and for
Mm,
me, it really clicked.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Are you so? Well, it's interesting that the whole folk horror thing to me, how do I say this? It's got the same heavy, dark
Mhm.
weightedness to it often that I feel like some like I don't want to say like old time period based gothic does, but it's like
Mhm.
just so adjacent to
Yeah.
a lot of the classic literature that we've read because their versions of like fantastical horror were very much what we would like look at as folk horror today.
Yeah.
And I just find it so fascinating. Stephanie Ellis is, just kind of one of my go-to folk horror
Mhm.
writers. I love reading her stuff. Is there a particular folk horror author that kind of inspires you or inspired you to kind of pursue that route?
I would say, yeah, again, Thomas Hoivelt. He's the one, man. He kicked it off, and then again, like I'm big into the movies.
Mm,
The Witch.
yep.
I love that film. Even like The Lighthouse. And then bringing it back a little bit, 30 Days of Night. I
Oh,
love
I
that
still
one
haven't
too.
seen that.
Oh, it's great. It's very good.
Nice.
So I kind of wanted to do something similar to that. I don't know if that's necessarily folk horror, but I guess you can consider like vampires in a certain context to be
Sure.
folk. Yeah.
Are you planning that release this year?
2025. Yeah.
2025. Okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it is within the next year and
Yeah.
ish. And are you let's see, how can I ask this with so you've got those two releases scheduled.
Well, one is scheduled. The
Okay,
folk
then
horror is,
right.
yeah.
Gotcha.
And then I
Okay.
got my other project, which will probably be 2026. I don't want to
Mhm.
rush anything. And I also want to give the other one kind of like room to breathe because this is going to be really my first release, um, which is funny because it's my third book, but my first release of me kind of like being in this like world. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Because my first two books, I never really went to a whole lot of events. I didn't really, network a whole lot. So this is the first one where I'll be putting out a book where people like actually know who I am. Funny enough.
Right?
So I kind of want to give it like its own space.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right. And those titles are forthcoming, so we can't share those on air yet.
The title is forthcoming. Yeah. I
Right.
do have I don't know. I don't know if you do like if you allow guests to do like readings or stuff like that, but I have like the
Of
first couple of pages
of
if you want
course.
to
Yeah,
hear.
we'd love that.
Yeah,
No, that'd be great.
it's only like 4 pages. I don't know. Maybe it'll be like 4 or 5 minutes. But I don't know
Don't
if you yeah.
don't warn them. Just give it to them. Yeah, no, we'd love that. This will
Cool,
actually be the first on-air reading we've had on the show. And
cool.
don't worry, as much fun as we're having right now, folks, Ed and I talked about this beforehand.
Yeah,
So,
this was planned.
yeah, and I would love to hear this. And let me just give you props before you even get started.
Mhm,
That it is a big thing to do a reading.
mhm.
And I'm not a person that's especially confident reading my own work. And every
Me
time I
either.
go to one of these events, everyone's like, "Hey, do you want to sign up for a reading?" And I'm like, "Yes." And I'm saying
Yeah.
yes because I'm supposed to, that's what I need to be doing.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
deep down inside, I'm like, "Oh God, what am I going to read? How's it going to
Oh,
come?"
same. Dude,
Like, how am I going to do this?
I I have so much anxiety in general. I've been working on it.
Mm,
I mean, I don't know if you noticed when we met at AuthorCon, I was super shy, man. I didn't know anybody, and
mm,
it's just hard for me to kind of like get out of my shell. But I'm
sure.
working on it. So, but when it comes to like readings and things like that, it's like this is what I want to do. So we just got to do it.
Just got to do it, dude.
Just got to do it.
Just got to do it. Well, let me know when you're
You know,
good. You're ready to rock.
I'm good. If I stumble or anything like that, I apologize. But I'm gonna do the best I can.
Do it. Hey, do you need mood lighting or background music or anything?
Nah, we're good. We're good.
And if people wanted to hum
Hopefully.
along at home, like, it's encouraged.
So this probably isn't going to be its final form, but I do think that this is pretty damn close to what's going to be in the final book.
Perfect.
Um, So here we go. No official title yet. Um, yeah, Blair, New York, 1793. It was the sight of the flower which made Isaac Fisher believe he can protect his home from the disease known as consumption. The village of Blair, New York, sat isolated, away from many of the horrors taking place over in New England. However, it was only a matter of time before the stories began to trickle in from across Lake Champlain. The separation between Blair and this novel sickness was shrinking. Eventually, consumption would spread to their doorsteps, bringing death and misery. That could not happen. Isaac could not bear to see his neighbors, his family, fall ill. He knew that having to bury his wife or children was a pain he could not endure. And so, Isaac Fisher became obsessed with finding a way to protect his village. He vowed to assure Blair would remain safe. He would do so by any means necessary. It nested in his mind like an unscratchable itch. It continued to burn even when his mind was preoccupied with unsavory behaviors, while he spent evenings with a woman who was not his wife, a stranger, in fact, the woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. She was an outsider to Blair, not yet a part of the community, and yet Isaac was drawn to her. Her name was Grace, and for most of the village of Blair, that was all that was known of this woman. Isaac, however, was learning her well. He understood Grace had come from someplace far away. He learned she was a specialist in the field of botany and natural medicine. He also learned her touch as he felt her fingers claw the flesh of his back. His hands slipped as he gripped her wrists, pressing them into the wrinkled sheets as they both moved. The last glimpse of sunlight faded, darkening the single room of the isolated cabin on the outskirts of Blair. Grace closed her eyes tight, her breath intensifying as Isaac's grip on her wrists tightened. Wisps of air grazed Isaac's ear, a tingle, a tingle rolling down his spine, shame masquerading itself as pleasure down his back. All the while, Isaac stared ahead, focused on one thing: the flower on her mantle. He discovered it when Grace first arrived on the outskirts of Blair, this novel presence for the northeastern corridor of New York. It sat casually on her mantle as if it were a common sight, its stem erecting out of the vase, splitting off into branches. A smooth purple flower, so dark it was almost black, marked the edge of the stem. It was unlike anything Isaac had ever seen before. He was captivated by it, and the closer he got to this woman, the closer he got to the flower. He needed to know more about her, desperately needed a way to protect his home. A final warm breath hit Isaac's face, and he rolled over, wiping his brow. He stood from the too small bed and uttered, "I have to go." Grace sat up from the bed, covering herself in the sheets. She watched Isaac get dressed, not taking his eyes off of something. The look in his eyes frightened her. This hungry passion of him wanting something. It was the look he gave her when she first arrived in Blair. It was the look she was too afraid to say no to, especially to a man like Isaac Fisher with influence in the town. "Tell me why you come here," Grace breathed. She held the sheet close to her body as if it would protect her. Isaac turned, locking eyes with her for what felt like the first time. "What is this flower?" he asked. "I have to know." Grace sighed. "The flower is called the Devil's Trumpet. It belongs in the nightshade family of flowers, related to thorn apples and jimson weed. It gets its name from the shape and the dark shade of purple." "It really is beautiful," Isaac said, approaching it. "Careful," she said. "It's very delicate and very rare." Isaac turned around and she felt dread in her heart. The instinct to protect the flower exceeded the instinct to hold her tongue by the smallest margin. "Rare," he said. "You have a garden in your yard, no?" "I do, but this one is special," she said. "The original. It is native to my homeland. It has not yet acclimated to this climate. Where are you from? Grace only looked at him. Not important, Isaac said. Tell me why this flower is so special. It is said the devil's trumpet has healing properties. If used correctly, I believe it has the ability to ward off the harshest of disease. Additionally, it has numbing properties for ailments such as toothache. Fascinating, Isaac said as he inched closer to the flower. He reached out a hand to graze its leaf when, please, Grace said, almost a whisper, please. It's very delicate. Why are you so insistent I don't touch it? I want to try it. Isaac looked out the window, which overlooked Half Moon Lake. It was a beautiful view, moonlight reflecting the calm water. He could see a cave out in the distance as well, also in his periphery, a patch of plotted dirt leading up the embankment of the edge of the lake. He knew she had more of the plant. If you don't let me touch its beauty, I will expose you for who you really are, a witch, a whore. She gasped, calling me a whore when you're the one with a wife and a family, yet you still come here? Don't, Isaac said. Don't have me correct you. I will have you burned. He turned back toward the plant. I must try it. Are you ill? No, he said, but I need to see. I want to experience what you've described. I don't think that's advisable. I am still learning this plant. I don't know the effects it can have on a healthy person. The effects it has had on the sick has been very questionable. I'm not a doctor, and I believe this should only be consumed under the supervision of one. Besides, Mr. Fisher, you have children at home. Perhaps something should happen to you. Please think about them. Do you want me to do you want me to tell the town that you are practicing witchcraft? Isaac spat. I said, I want you to show me what this plant can do. I need to know. I must be able to prevent Blair from the pain and suffering being caused by the consumption virus. It's only a matter of time before this terrible disease spreads to our town. Either you help me and be remembered as a hero, or if you stand against me, you will be remembered as a witch, someone who has allowed evil into our small community. The choice is yours.
Nice, dude. Yeah.
It's very, very different from the Triangle
It
Forest.
is very different. I love it.
Yeah.
No, that's cool, man. I love the premise of it. Chris Panettiere is big on botany, so this is gonna be,
Mm, okay.
this is I got those vibes right away. It's like
Cool.
I don't really, have an opportunity to read much, m many stories that include a lot of elements of botany in it, so super cool, dude.
Mhm, mhm.
And I love that
Yeah,
he's
man.
kind of there's a little catch-22 there with the relationship, right? Like, he's got her kind of cornered because of the societal
Mhm, mhm.
those particular time periods, that was a real
There
threat.
were a lot of layers to, a woman's, place in society, especially in that time, and, that was kind of what like, the overall one of the overall themes of the story is that how, like, people are, treated women and, that's especially, relevant now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to there are kind of interludes in this book. So 1793 was kind of like the foundation, and then there's like modern day stuff too. So we do kind of like jump back and forth a little bit. Um, and yeah, the book does kind of show the parallels of how, like, even though things have changed a lot in 2 centuries, they kind of
Mhm.
haven't.
Right.
Um, so that's one of the themes there. And I wanted to go about it like as respectfully as possible because I also never really wrote a scene like that before. Um,
That's so cool, dude.
so
You you said tingles to me. You read that to me.
I did.
Uh, oh, little diary of mine. Today, Ed Flora read an intimate scene to me.
Just for you, man. You
I'm
were
gonna
like
tell
one of the first people who introduced themselves at AuthorCon, so you
really?
got yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, well. If
Yeah.
I had only known then what I know now about Ed Flora, would
Yes,
have
sir.
introduced myself sooner. No, that's great. I really like it.
Yeah.
It's clean. it's I can tell, I can hear and sense the maturity in it. Um,
Yeah,
that's great.
it it's funny because I think about the previous book. I think about Triangle Forest, and
Mm,
you know, I rewrote that book multiple times, and this is draft 3. So, I had my first draft, which was kind of just like ideas and all that, and then I cleaned it up. And I don't know, I'm putting in the work. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I really, really care about this thing, and
love it.
this is my creative outlet. We talked a little bit about this before, but I was a musician before, and I don't really have that anymore.
Right.
I don't have a band. I don't have so this is it. So
And it's a very different creative outlet.
yeah, 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 yep,
Like even like opposite ends of the spectrum as far as like the physical elements of that. You and I both have been live performing metal
mhm,
musicians. It's a
yeah.
high energy game, man.
Oh yes, yeah,
There's a certain high that comes from that level of like adrenaline and blood flow and
yeah,
physical, like just you feel alive when you're on
yeah,
stage like that. It's so funny to have those wins in isolation, in silence,
yeah.
as an author.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And the neighbors aren't as upset, right?
yeah.
Unless I'm like pounding on the keyboard.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one's
So,
worse for my wife because she she's like, dude, if you don't stop, talking, I obsess over my stories while I'm
uh
writing
huh,
them,
yeah,
and this poor lady is subjected to it the entire time. So it's in her
yep,
best interest that I finish a book earlier rather than later.
uh
Um,
huh.
but she and I
Same.
didn't meet until after I was already done with my little music career.
Yes, same deal over here. Yeah, it's funny.
That's great, man. Well, we're really excited to see that book when it comes out next year. I
Yeah.
am for one signing up for an advanced copy as soon as they're on pre-order. I'm gonna be
Oh
throwing
yeah.
money at you. So, um, dude, that's really cool. Hey, thanks for being the first reading on the show.
Hey man, I'm honored.
The first, you're gonna go down in history. So, I've had
Yeah.
some like very first repeat interview. We've had
Mhm.
first extreme horror. We've had first cosmic horror. You're the first reading, man.
I think this is the first time. No, it is. This is the first time I've ever read any of my work to anyone that is
Oh.
not my fiance. So
Don't tell her we've had this moment together.
be if anyone's watching this, be kind. No, it's cool. It's cool.
No, that's cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that music stuff you were just
Mhm,
mentioning. When you write,
mhm,
are you do you find that you have to have music when you write, or do you find that okay, yeah, you're
mhm.
probably a lot like I am.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I am depending on what I'm writing, depends
Mhm.
on like the way I interact with music when I'm writing.
Yep.
It's very much like if the story is synced emotionally with the type of music I'm listening to, it's just I almost consider it like so I use this analogy or description when I was telling my wife one time. I said, you're gonna hear a lot of depressing music over the next 3 months coming out of my office. I
Yeah.
want to tie a block of Tori Amos around my feet and throw it in
Ah.
the ocean and just let it pull me all the way to the bottom because I need to be
Get a knock
fully
on the door. Like, "Are you
yeah,
okay?"
I need to be fully submerged in order to
Yeah.
get where I need to go so that I can at least give myself the greatest opportunity to try and capture the feeling I'm trying to give the reader. Like, I don't know that I'll pull it off, but I want to try, and if
Mhm,
I want to give it my best shot. So, what kind of stuff are you listening to when you're writing? And it could be
mhm,
something very different from book type to book type, right? So, like for example, like Triangle Forest versus
mhm,
the new folk horror. What
yeah.
were you listening to when you were writing the Triangle Forest?
So there were a few bands, a few albums that I really had on heavy rotation. And to clarify, I'm not really a black metal guy, but for some reason I feel like black metal really works and
Mm,
setting the mood for writing. One band in particular, I think they're from France. They're called Blut as Nord.
mm,
Very atmospheric. They have one album. It's called Disharmonium,
mm.
Undreamable Abysses. And even though it's black metal, that one is instrumental. So that one's like perfect balance of atmosphere and not having someone screaming in your ear. So that
Nice.
one was perfect. In writing the Triangle Forest, I was also listening to a lot of like Rivers of Nile, a lot of Decrepit Birth, especially like Axis Mundi,
Wow.
which also kind of inspired a little bit the story itself, like the thing in the woods. Um, so yeah, it does vary. I used to listen to a lot more instrumental stuff, but now I'm finding I am able to kind of fit in like music with screaming in it
Sure.
and still be able to focus. Particularly black metal, like the atmospheric stuff. There's this band called White Ward.
Mm.
I think they're from Ukraine and they're phenomenal. Very atmospheric stuff. And there's some like orchestral stuff. They have like a saxophone in there in some songs too, similar to like what Rivers of Nile does, but with black metal. So that's
With
very interesting.
saxophones.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. Cool stuff.
I don't know that I've ever heard saxophone laden black metal.
It's it's interesting. I You should check it out. It's
I'm
pretty good. I'll send
literally
you some
going to my
recs.
yeah, I was gonna say you have to send me a DM or
Yep.
something with that in it because I would love to hear that. Um,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, that's awesome, man. I get struck by songs
Mhm.
that I don't get sick of that I could literally listen to every day when I'm writing. Like I'm not one of those writers that has to have something different every time. I can do
Mhm.
it. I can do with lyrics. I can do it singing or screaming. It doesn't pull me from the story.
Mhm.
I think I just kind of like go in a bit and the music's right here.
Yeah.
But the only time like I can't deal with a lot of like other things like conversations around me because
Yeah.
I find that
Yeah.
I'm listening,
Yep. Yep.
you know?
Yeah. Which is why I always write with headphones on.
Right.
Especially like my fiance's here, if we're in the other room watching TV and like I don't want to like isolate myself all the time. So sometimes I'll spend some time in the other room and like watch TV, but I got the headphones on because
Yeah.
if I'm listening to the TV, it's a wrap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes my compromise if I miss my writing time earlier in the day for family obligations because we got 3 teenagers and all the things that come along with the house, the kids, the things, it's like, and they're my blessings, but at the same time,
Mhm.
I'm like, I gotta jump to this appointment. I can't
Yeah.
use my normal writing time. It'll end up being after dinner at night.
Mhm.
I'm like a kind of a night writer or an early morning writer. Although like mentally I can just write at any time and my
Mhm.
brain just never stops while I'm writing a story. It just won't stop the story. So it's like constant. I'm like very motivated to get the thing done because of that. But but I'll throw on the earbuds and sit in my chair in the living room, while
Yep.
my wife's watching TV or something, and I'm just like somewhere else. but
Yeah.
but I have to be with them.
Yeah.
I don't
Yep.
want to just be locked away. Um, to your point. Um,
Yeah.
so
I mean, it's good things.
yeah, yeah, no, like and I also want my kids to like see. I want them to remember that. Like, yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
that's
my
cool.
dad downstairs writing.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because one day they'll look at this and they'll think it's cool.
Yeah.
My daughter thinks it's cool because she's a bigger reader. My boys are like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, you wrote another book? That's cool." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
My daughter's like, "When do I get to read it?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Here." She's always
Awesome.
my first reader. Um,
Yeah.
so let's close out a little bit on some other notes. Outside of Angela Sylvain's Frostbite, um, what else have you been reading lately that you think,
Mhm.
people should know about? Like, you've
Yeah.
you've got a very active presence, like I mentioned earlier in the show on TikTok,
Mhm.
and a vast majority of what you're doing on there are just phenomenal book reviews. And you
Mhm.
got like a monthly plan, like number of books you're gonna read, and
Yes.
like, is this an accountability thing? Like, and
A
you
little
you
bit.
you get them done, man.
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, I like to stay organized. It's funny, I have a whole Excel sheet with
Mm,
different tabs of like each year and each month, and I post all the books and I keep them because I like to know what I'm reading, and also like, did I read that book in 2022 or like, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'll always like reference the Excel doc and all that. But yeah, a few off the top of my head that really stood out to me. American Rapture by CJ Lead
I cannot wait to read
was
that.
phenomenal.
Wow.
Especially someone myself, I grew up and I went to Catholic school my whole life.
Mm,
So this book was like she was speaking directly to me,
wow.
you know? Incredible. So good. Um, and then Beyond the Bounds of Infinity, I think I did talk about this one on
Mm,
TikTok as well. This was a cosmic horror collection. It was from Raw Dog Screaming Press. It was edited by Vaughn A. Jackson and Stephanie Pierre. Um, S.A. Cosby has a story in it, which is very cool.
really? Awesome.
But it's great. Like we talked about earlier, how cosmic horror can be on different scales. You know, it could be this grand scale thing, or it could be an individual level. And that collection really hits every point. So I definitely recommend that one. What else have I been reading? I read Through the Eyes of Desperation. There are two of them. I
Hmm,
read the Daniel J. Volpe one,
okay.
and then there's the Aaron Beauregard one, which I'm gonna read. And that
Oh.
one is wild.
Are they 2, I mean, obviously 2 separate books.
So, from what I understand, it's two separate stories taking place in the same casino.
Okay.
So, I don't think they're like sequels or anything like that. It's just two parallel stories happening in the same place.
Oh, and so Beauregard wrote one and Volpe wrote the
Mhm.
other one, and
Yep.
oh, awesome, okay.
Yeah.
Dude, that's wild, man.
Yeah.
See, I co-author a series with my editor, Zach Bohannon, who's,
Mm.
yeah, one of my book fiction mentor guys. It's also one of my best buds, just hilarious, huge metalhead. I mean, we're
Nice.
two little peas in a pod when it comes to music. I'm gonna be sending him every band you just listed. Like, dude, check
Nice.
this out. Um, but that's totally different than like writing 2 separate stories in the same space.
Mm. Yeah.
Are they, I mean, do they interact?
I don't know yet. I
Yeah.
haven't read the Beauregard one.
Okay, gotcha.
From what I understand, I do think there is a little bit of overlap,
Okay.
but that's TBD. Yeah.
Pretty cool, man. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
sharing those with us, dude. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
tell people where they should be following you, where they should connect with you.
Yeah. Edward J. Flora. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I do have the website, gravesendbooks.com. There's not a whole lot on there, but if you want a signed book, they're available there.
All right.
I don't have a blog yet, maybe one day, but yeah, Edward J. Flora across the board.
All right. And are you coming back to AuthorCon this year?
Not AuthorCon. I
Okay.
will be at StokerCon though.
Right. Because that's in your backyard.
Which yeah, I wasn't planning on going it, but when they said it was in Stamford, I'm like, that's 15 minutes from me. I can't not go.
You have to go.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you my ticket. You have to go. It's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be coming up for that one. At first, I wasn't sure if I
Nice.
was gonna be able to make it to Stanford because, my son's graduation is that
Oh,
weekend prior. I didn't know when he was gonna graduate. I knew it was gonna be right in there. So I kinda
oh,
lucked out. I'm like, "Yes." So I'll
yeah.
I'll I'll see you there, dude. And,
Sweet.
go check out, Ed's social media. He's great. He was, like I said in the beginning of the episode, he was the one who pulled me over to Twitter, or sorry, to, TikTok, and you're still my TikTok fave. I love to
Oh, thanks, man.
check out your channel. And you're an inspiration on there because you do a really good job of showcasing a good mix of like indie horror and some of the more trad published stuff. And I just love what you're bringing to the table, dude. So thanks so much, man.
Thanks, man.
All right,
Appreciate that.
guys. Well, look, Ed is awesome. Go check out his stuff. Keep your eyes peeled for the folk horror coming in 2025. Make your way out to StokerCon. You can hang out with all of us together, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, man.